What if the most important war in the world right now is one you can't see, no explosions, no breaking news alerts, no official declarations, and yet it could decide who controls the future of intelligence itself, not land, not oil, not weapons, but something far more powerful, the ability to think at scale. Because while most people are busy using AI to write emails, generate images, or automate small tasks, a much bigger game is unfolding behind the scenes. A silent competition between companies, between governments, between ideologies, all racing toward one goal: control over artificial intelligence. And here's the part most people don't fully grasp. This isn't just about building better technology. It's about building systems that can influence economies, reshape societies, and potentially outthink human decision-making itself. Which means the question is no longer, who has the best product? The real question is, who gets to shape reality? Because power has always followed intelligence. In ancient times it was strategy, in modern times it became information, but now we are entering a phase where intelligence itself can be manufactured, scaled, and deployed. And whoever masters that doesn't just gain an advantage, they redefine the game. To understand why this matters, you have to zoom out. Every major era of power in human history was built on control of something fundamental: land. Resources, labor, energy, information. Each time, the players who controlled that layer dominated everything built on top of it. Empires rose, economies shifted, societies reorganized. Now ask yourself, what happens when the most valuable resource is no longer physical, but cognitive, when the key advantage is not what you own, but how intelligently you can act? That's what AI represents, not just a tool, but a force multiplier for decision-making, prediction, and influence. And that's why the race for AI power is not optional. It's inevitable. Right now, there are three major forces competing in this space, and each of them is playing a very different game. The first is corporations. Technology companies are building increasingly powerful AI systems, training them on vast amounts of data, and integrating them into products used by billions of people. On the surface, it looks like innovation. Better tools, better services, more convenience, but underneath that, these companies are building something far more significant. They are building infrastructure for intelligence. Systems that can process information, generate content, automate decisions, and influence behavior at scale. And here's the key insight: the more people use these systems, the more data they generate. And the more data these systems have, the better they become. This creates a feedback loop. Use data, right arrow, improvement, right arrow, more use, and over time, that loop becomes incredibly difficult to compete with. Which means the companies that led early can build advantages that compound rapidly, not just in technology, but in influence. Because when your system becomes the layer through which people search, communicate, and create, and decide, you don't just provide a service, you shape outcomes quietly, continuously, at scale. The second force is governments, because no nation can ignore a technology that affects economic power, military capability, information control, and societal stability. AI is not just a commercial asset, it's a strategic one. Governments understand that whoever leads in AI may gain advantages in cybersecurity, intelligence gathering, autonomous systems, decision support, and global influence. This is why countries are investing heavily in AI research, regulation, and infrastructure. Not just to use AI, but to ensure they are not left behind. Because in a world where AI can accelerate progress, falling behind doesn't just mean slower growth, it means vulnerability, and that creates tension. Because technological leadership is no longer just about innovation, it's about geopolitical positioning. The third force is something less visible but equally important: data. Because AI systems don't operate in a vacuum. They are trained on information, massive amounts of it: text, images, video, behavioral patterns, user interactions. And here's the critical point: data is not evenly distributed. Some organizations have access to far more data than others, and that gives them an advantage, because better data leads to better models. Better models lead to better performance. Better performance leads to more users. And more users generate more data. It's another compounding loop. Which means the race for AI power is also a race for who controls the most meaningful data, not just quantity, but quality, context, relevance, and access. Now here's where things become more complex, because this race is not happening in isolation. These forces overlap. Companies work with governments, governments regulate companies, data flows between systems, Infrastructure connects everything, and in that interconnected system, small advantages can turn into massive dominance. But there's a problem, because as AI becomes more powerful, the consequences of control become more significant. If a system influences what people see, it influences what they believe. If it influences what they believe, it influences how they act, and when that happens at scale, you're no longer just dealing with technology. You're dealing with power over perception, and perception shapes reality. This is why the idea of a hidden war is not exaggeration. It's just not visible in the way traditional conflicts are. There are no front lines, no uniforms. No clear winners or losers, just continuous movement, continuous development, continuous positioning, and the stakes are increasing. Because the next phase of AI is not just about intelligence, it's about autonomy. Systems that don't just assist, but operate, agents that can execute tasks, make decisions, coordinate actions, and adapt in real time. This changes everything. Because once systems can act independently, they become participants in the world, not just tools used within it, and whoever controls those systems controls their behavior, their priorities, their boundaries, their limits. Now imagine this at scale. Millions of AI agents operating across businesses, governments, communication networks, financial systems, making decisions, executing actions, interacting with each other at speeds humans cannot match. That's not a small shift, that's a new layer of civilization, and like every new layer, it will be shaped by those who build it. But here's where the situation becomes even more complicated, because control is not absolute. Even the creators of these systems don't always fully understand how they behave. As AI models grow more complex, they become harder to interpret, harder to predict, harder to control, which introduces a different kind of risk, not just misuse, but misalignment, systems acting in ways that are technically correct, but contextually harmful, optimizing for the wrong goals, scaling unintended consequences. And when those systems operate at large scale, small errors can become large problems quickly. So now the challenge is not just, how do we build powerful AI? It becomes, how do we build systems that remain aligned with human values as they grow more capable? And that is not a trivial problem, because human values are not simple, they are complex, context-dependent, sometimes contradictory. And translating that into systems is extremely difficult. Meanwhile, the race continues. Faster models, better capabilities, wider deployment, because slowing down is not easy. If one player pauses, another moves ahead. And in a competitive environment, that creates pressure to build, pressure to release, pressure to scale, even when the long-term consequences are uncertain. And that's the paradox of the hidden war. Everyone understands the risks, but no one wants to fall behind, so progress continues, relentlessly. Now let's step back for a moment, because it's easy to get lost in the systems, the competition, the strategy, but all of this leads to a more personal question. Where does this leave you? Because most people are not building AI systems, they are using them, and in that role, it's easy to feel like a spectator, but that's not entirely accurate, because even as a user, you are part of the system. Your data contributes, your behavior feeds models, your attention shapes outcomes, which means influence doesn't only flow from the top down, it also flows from the bottom up, collectively, gradually. But here's the reality. Most of the structural power will still sit with those who build the systems, control the infrastructure, and define the rules. And that means the future of AI is not just technical, it's political, economic, ethical, strategic. So what does all of this lead to? Not a single outcome, but a range of possibilities in one scenario. AI becomes a tool that amplifies human potential, improving healthcare, expanding education, increasing productivity, solving complex problems. In another scenario, it becomes a system that concentrates power, amplifying inequality, controlling information, reducing autonomy, shaping behavior in subtle ways. And in reality, the future will likely include elements of both, because technology doesn't decide outcomes, people do, through choices, through incentives, through design, through governance. So when you hear about AI, don't just think about features or tools or apps, think about structure, think about control, think about who builds the systems you rely on, and how those systems shape what you see, what you think, and what you do. Because the most powerful technologies don't just change what we can do, they change how the world works. And by the time that change becomes obvious, it's usually already happened. So maybe the most important question isn't, who is winning the AI race? Maybe the real question is, What kind of world is being built while most people aren't paying attention? Because the hidden war for AI power is not just about technology, it's about the future of influence, the future of decision-making, and ultimately, the future of human agency itself, and whether that future becomes something empowering or something restrictive will depend on decisions being made right now, often quietly, often out of sight. Which means this war may be invisible, but its consequences won't be.